I actually do wonder with that, like how much, how, you said the vision changes or the vision is presented and then the tools come after it. I do think that yes, and I think in some instances, what's happening is there is an innovation in one field, and and then somebody in another field observes that innovation, and they think, oh, how could I take this technology that already exists that we're not utilizing and leverage into my business, right? I think there's a bit of that going on as well. It's not always, there is definitely the approach that like, I think of I was just talking about this earlier today, but um, the whole Quest bar thing, the nutrition bar, and it was like, oh, okay, they wanted to make a healthy, you know, I don't know, energy bar essentially. And what they realized was that we can't make this healthy energy bar because all of the equipment is designed to use high fructose corn syrup. So they literally had to, like, all of the manufacturing equipment for all these types of bars needed high fructose corn syrup because that's as an input in order for that machinery to work to output a bar that would hold together and not disintegrate and you could package up. And so they literally had to design the equipment. So in some cases, you have a vision, like that's a perfect example. You've got a vision, and then you have to go and design and innovate and create, literally engineer your own equipment and have it manufactured in order to execute on your vision. But
Yep,
I do
yep.
think that sometimes it's like, um, well, I mean, this is a concept more than a technology, but it applies like the Starbucks concept, right? That
Yep.
was somebody, they were already doing it that way in another part of the world. Somebody went there, they visited, they saw it, and they're like, well, let's bring that over here. And then sometimes I think you have it like cross-pollination across industries, where somebody, is doing things a certain way in their industry and using a certain technology, and then somebody has the eureka moment, like, oh, we could take that and apply that to our business and use it slightly differently, but we could
Yep.
leverage that technology. I can't think of a good example for that one off the top of my head, but I think there's a bit of I think it comes from multiple angles in terms
I
of
think
whether
there's a
it's
lot of cross-pollination, like when you get into, what maybe one funny example is sort of, when Disney bought the Muppets. And, Disney has been working on animatronics for a very long time, right?
mm,
And so you get this cross-pollination of, um, there's a lot of effort that goes into Disney animatronics and things like that. And so, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of things, and it ultimately it's to make fun-looking Muppets that can ride around in Disneyland, or to make I think a dragon that could fly like overhead, like as a drone. And they all add to the experience. There's all sort of a vision there. I think the idea, like all of this technology is in service, I think, of one really old idea that Walt Disney had, which is to turn Disneyland into like a fairy tale land that you would walk into and you would have like cartoon characters walk about. And so for the
yeah,
longest time, that meant humans dressed up as cartoon characters. But as we
still
get
does.
further along, and now we've got robots, and now we've got all these other things, it's like, well, and
Yeah.
it's slower than they expected. But there is this vision, and the vision was, let's make this fairy tale land. And the technology had to catch up to the vision. But
Mm,
what could happen is that you have this vision, but it might modify because you saw somebody doing something different. Jim Henson doing something completely different than what Disney was doing because he had these, Muppets, right? That look different, that function different, and people love them as well. And so it's sort of like, that might change the course of how you plan your vision in terms of where you would take your theme park or something like that, right?
mhm.
So I do think the technology is in service of the vision, but the vision has to be informed by the technology that's out there. And sometimes, a lot of times, I think that's how it evolves and gets better over time. And I think with the new tools, the hope is not that everybody has the same vision and we're all executing on the same vision. I think that's sort of bleak. I think there's this idea that we already know how X works. Therefore, the technology is here to make X so efficient that we cut all of the humans out. And you're mainly thinking about AI and robotics and stuff like that. And I think that assumes, that X has already been optimized. The vision has already been optimized. We already know what the vision is. But I think, throughout human history, it's like everybody who thought we knew what our utopia looked like, we knew exactly what, the end goal was supposed to look like, always seems to be changed, right? Somebody always comes along with something different, some not necessarily better, but different. And I think, like that vision, we do have to try a lot of these different things and kind of expand and try something and let certain things fail, right? It's not really all in service of maintaining or optimizing, to a dystopian degree like one vision. So I think I'm kind of optimistic about a lot of the technology in the sense that I don't think humans want to stick with that one vision. I think going back to the Disney analogy or the Disney example is that Walt Disney wanted to build like a society inside of Disneyland that would be like Epcot, where everybody would actually live and work there, and workers in Disneyland would live and work there, and he was going to rent them all apartments that they could live and then work in Disneyland and things like that. But it turns out nobody actually wanted to do that. Like, nobody wanted to follow that vision because when you think about it, it's no matter how happy Disneyland is, it sounds kind of dystopian, right? To live in a structured Disneyland environment that is all built out for you. You weren't allowed to customize or change anything. It all had to look Disney, sounds like a Twilight Zone thing, right?
I visited what I could only describe as pretty much sweatshops that had that exact layout where, people lived within the confines of these apartment buildings that shared the land with the
And I think
factories.
I think Ford had the same idea a long, long time ago. And then yeah, we see
Yeah.
that in lots of parts of Asia and things like that.
Yep.
I think it is one of those things where there is a vision, and maybe not everybody agrees with it, actually. Maybe that's not how people want to live. And to some
Mm.
degree, somebody has a better vision. And I feel like the tools are in service of, well, here's a different way. Here's a better way to live. Here's a different way to organize a factory. Here's a better way to organize a theme park or a tech company or something like that, or a restaurant. And then I feel like how well thought out is that vision? Like to some degree, like can we be spending more time there? Because I do think, like our lives are going to shift drastically with this technology.